Welcome to Around the Weird. Here's your host, the museum curator of the strange and unusual, Mr. Nothing.
Thank you, mysterious voice, and welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I've found in my travels. Today it is Poetry Thursday, so I wanted to talk about some poetry that was interesting to me lately. It is about bees. I am referring to Bee Whisperer by Laura Secord. For those who don't know, Laura Secord is a fairly new poet, only getting some of her work published within, I'd say, the past 5 years, as I can't find anything about her later than that. I believe she's from Alabama, and she's also went to like Sierra Nevada College or something like that. Like I said, pretty new poet, don't know too much else about her. What drew me to her poem, though, was that I realized back when I first started the Poetry Thursday videos, I wanted to. I made a little bit where I talked about some poems that were focused on bees, and I realized I haven't done that in quite some time. So I just wanted to return to some bee poetry, as it's quite unusual that there's so much poetry about bees, even though bees are like, a nothing type of animal. Like, why is there so much focus on them? It's kind of funny to me. I don't know if it's as funny to anyone else, though. But without further ado, let's talk about this poem. I will read it, do a little bit of analysis, and we will move on from there. Bee Whisperer. For weeks we've seen some wild winds. Today I find my hives knocked over. A season's honey smeared in rivers on the ground. I stand their domes again. The bees are swarming in the trees and fighting against the gale. I watch one entire colony trapped by a whirlwind, carried out and up across the green. I run to follow and see them swept over the river and caught in a maple grove. Can anyone call bees? Alone before the water's edge, in desperate worry for my colony, not knowing what to do, I hold my arms high as if to block the wind, and cry like swarming bees. I speak about our apple blossoms, promise them acres of blossoms and honey mounds. Your domes are upright, your babies waiting. Suddenly, in one black cloud, they return across the water, above my raised head and waving arms over the green. When I return almost horizontal against the raging winds, I climb to my orchard and find the hives filling back with colonies of bees. And so that was Bee Whisperer by Laura Secord. In terms of analysis, it's a pretty interesting poem, pretty funny. The narrator describes some wind that is blowing over their beehives, their domes, and them trying to wrangle all the bees in the midst of this very unusual weather, wondering, is any of this worth it? Are the bees even going to come back? Ultimately, the bees do return, and presumably the narrator is happy about that. I think if you're going to talk about this poem, you have to view it as sort of as a human versus nature type poem, kind of examining how humans are kind of powerless against nature at times, because you see at the beginning of the poem, they talk about how for weeks we've seen some wild winds. Today I find my hives knocked over. I stand their domes again. The bees are swarming in the trees and fighting against the gale. So the wind is a big problem for the narrator. Like, the narrator can't control the wind, and they have to constantly deal with it affecting them. It's no matter how many times they probably stand up these domes, these beehives, they probably fall over again. And to make matters worse, their bees are in trees and fighting and roaming about, making things very difficult. Like, how do you even wrangle bees? As the narrator says later in the poem, can anyone even call bees? It seems like quite challenging, but they do try to figure out a way. Because as they say in like the third verse, they say they cry like bees and they hold their arms high. They speak about apple blossoms and honey mounds for the bees. Whether or not the narrator is actually doing that remains to be seen, because how do you speak bee? That, especially as a human being, we're not very good at making those buzzing sounds in the ways that bees can. So it seems like they're at least trying to speak to the bees. And in any other case, that might not be very helpful, because certainly bees don't speak English and human beings can't really speak bees. But as the poem ends, we see, suddenly in one black cloud, they return across the water above my raised head and waving arms over the green. And they find that the hives are filling up with the colonies again. So very successful. But I think what this gets at is how a human being is overwhelmed by nature, and they're really doing anything to try to make things work and get the bees to come back. They wave their arms, they're saying random things, promising bees whatever they want, and the bees do come back. But I think they're equating that with like something they did, sort of like a superstition or a strange ritual that guarantees that you success. Maybe they've done this before or something like that. But I do think how this poem kind of gets at our tendency to try anything, throw everything at the wall, see what sticks. And in this case, something worked, and they might think that that's going to work in the future. But as shown by the earlier parts of this poem, sometimes if you do prepare for nature, it's still gonna be a struggle. Like, no matter what you do, things might not work out for the best, and it's going to produce a bit of a headache for you. And so I do like this poem for the kind of silly way that it shows that human beings are bound to struggle against nature from time to time, even if we are trying to master them with beehives and other such things. Anyway, those are my thoughts on Bee Whisperer by Laura Secord, a pretty fun poem that I recommend that you check out. I'll put it in the description below so that you can read it. Let me know what your thoughts are. Let's have a discussion about this poem in the comments below. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that more people can find out about this poem and this author if they do not already know, and learn a bit more about Poetry Thursday if they want to go out there and read some poetry on their own channel. And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and beekeeper travels. Farewell.